So today we'll talk about the elastic deformation, or what is also known as Hooke's law. So as we know that in the initial region of deformation during the stress is directly proportional to the strain, and the constant which governs these two quantities is called Young's modulus or modulus of elasticity. This modulus actually represents the stiffness or resistance to the elastic deformation and is often an important parameter to design materials in which elastic deflections are very important. So the quantitatively for metals, elastic modulus ranges from 45 GPa for a soft metal such as magnesium to 407 GPa for a hard metal such as tungsten. For ceramics, the elastic modulus typically range in the range of 50 to 500 GPa, and for polymers they are very less and 0.007 to 4 GPa. Now, not every material displays a linear elastic stress strain region during elastic deformation. For those materials such as cast iron, grey cast iron, concrete, and many other polymers, the elastic region is non-linear. So, for this region, we can determine the elastic modulus in two ways. One is using tangent modulus, one is using secant modulus. Tangent modulus is usually determined by determining the slope at any particular given point, let's say at sigma 2 of the stress strain curve. So this particular modulus will help us in determining the elastic modulus of this particular material. Another way of doing it is using secant modulus. In secant modulus, we draw a line from the origin at the point at which we require the modulus to be determined. So that is at sigma 1. So this gives us another way of determining the secant modulus. If you look at the elastic deformation from the atomic scale, you will find that it is nothing but the stretching of interatomic bonds. So also we can say that elastic modulus is directly proportional to the force which is acting between the two atoms and the interatomic spacing between the two atoms. So this, if we calculate this slope at the equilibrium spacing at which the two atoms are stable at their stable condition, we will find that this represents actually the higher value for the more strongly bonded atoms than the weakly bonded atoms. So you can see from these two curves, the upper curve is for the strongly bonded atom. This curve represents a higher slope at the equilibrium spacing than the one for the weakly bonded atom. So this particular elastic modulus is actually dependent upon the atomic or microscale properties of the materials. Also, this particular constant decreases with temperature. So you can see representative material aluminium at 100, it has got a typical room temperature elastic modulus of 100 GPa, but at temperatures close to 400 degrees Celsius, its elastic modulus sharply decreases to less than 50 GPa. So we can say that the properties of materials under elastic regime are highly dependent on the temperature. Few other elastic properties which are important to study the elastic behavior of materials are Poisson's ratio. Poisson's ratio actually determines the lateral strain divided by axial strain. So for any material which is pulled along the horizontal or the uniaxial direction, there will always be restrictions among the other directions or the lateral direction. So the ratio of these two strains is actually determined by the Poisson's ratio. This typically lies in the range of 0.25 to 0.35. Ideally, it should be 0.25. Another property which determines the elastic properties is the elastic shear modulus. That is, it is governed by the slope of elastic region of shear stress versus shear strain curve. And typically these two constants, elastic modulus, shear modulus, are correlated using Poisson ratio and for isotropic materials. Whereas for anisotropic materials, typically the specification of a single elastic constant is not sufficient. So and for anisotropy is in the direction. So for each crystallographic direction, you will have to specify multiple elastic constants to completely define the properties of that material. The elastic deformation which we have studied till now is very minimal. Elastic deformation typically in metals ranges only up to 0.005 strain. Beyond that, the materials deform plastically. So plastic deformation, there is no recovery. The material does not come back to its original position. So when we look at the stress strain curve for the elastic plus plastic deformation, we find that there is a point at which there is a transition from elastic to plastic region. So that particular point is determined is actually called difficult to determine using the instrumentation technique. So the actual procedure which is used to determine that point is called the offset yield point, or that is the point at which 0.002% strain is permanent strain is possible in the material. So line is drawn parallel to the elastic regime, and the point at which we find 0.0002% strain is defined as the offset yield strength of the material. Often the stress strain curve is a different kind of behavior is shown by the materials such as steels in the stress strain curve in the plastic regime. They often yield two yield points, that is one upper yield point and a lower yield point, and the phenomena is called yield point phenomena. For the sake of engineering purposes, lower yield point is taken as the yield strength of the material, as this is well defined. Often the materials can have yield point or yield strength ranging from 100 to even 1400 MPa for the high strength steels. So if the plastic deformation is continued beyond the yield point, we obtain a maxima in the stress strain curve, that is what is called as the tensile strength of the material. At this particular point, this is the maximum stress which the material can bear without undergoing failure. So beyond this point, if the material is subjected to stress at the tensile region, the material will continue to deform with a uniform elastic deformation. Beyond this point, a neck or constriction will form in the material, and the deformation will be limited to that region. Because of that, we see a sudden decrease in the stress region, and at point fracture point, the material will brittle fail. But in engineering purposes, we do not use the tensile strength as the determining criteria, because by the time material has deformed to the tensile region, the material is no longer useful. That is why the yield point is considered as the determining criteria for the engineering materials. Ductility is defined as the percentage elongation which the material can bear before fracture. For the brittle material, the percentage elongation may be very less, and ductile materials might typically have a large percentage elongation which they can bear before failure. Typically in engineering design, ductility is an important criteria because it gives a design engineer the amount which the material can bear before going to failure. Sometimes ductile materials are also called forgiving materials because they allow the material to deform before going to fracture. Now we will consider two more important properties of plastic deformation in metals. First is the resilience and second is the toughness. The resilience mainly covers the initial part of the elastic region, and toughness is basically found in the plastic region. So the materials such as high carbon steel are considered more resilient because first they have the modulus of resistance can be defined as the sigma y square divided by the twice E. So you see high carbon steel has a higher elastic yield strength with the lower elastic modulus. Whereas the structural steel, that is also a tougher material, has a lower elastic yield strength but has got a higher elastic modulus. So in the way that two properties are complementary to each other, the material which have higher resilience will have lower toughness, and the material which have lower toughness will have higher resilience. So till now we have studied about the engineering stress and engineering strain. Now we will introduce the concept of true stress and true strain. So why the true strain is defined as the natural law of L by instantaneous length, whereas engineering strain is always dependent on the original length. Why do we consider true strain and why when we consider engineering strain? So let us consider the case in which there are large plastic deformation. Suppose there is a cylinder which is compressed to half its original length. So if we compute the engineering strain, we will find this will be infinite. But if you take true strain, this will give us a finite value. So in these situations, we obviously determine that the true strain is more beneficial. And also true strain is also additive. Suppose you carry out deformation in the sub-series of steps. If you will find that the engineering stress will not be equal to the individual addition of individual steps, whereas true strain will follow this property. So in the cases where the large plastic deformations are involved, we will always prefer the use of true strain.